Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say that I feel very honored to be here today. This is a cause that is very, very special to me, and I'm just very proud that I was asked to present.
And we thank you for coming and hearing what we have to say about gender and servant leadership.
So servant leadership, what is it and why do we care? Servant leadership has been around for about 40 years, but it's still relevant. There's just recently 2 articles written about it in the Smart Brief on Leadership. So it is still relevant. And what is it? It's a follower-centered way of leading, and it's been known to, or written about, that it brings mediocre leaders and mediocre organizations out of mediocrity. A quote that I just want to share with you. Employees who cannot trust their bosses will be less inclined to give their all to the work of the business. Unethical behavior undermines business productivity. In a highly competitive world, that can be deadly.
So, what is servant leaders, or what are servant leaders? They are different than what is called a transactional leader. A transactional leader is a traditional leader. Transactional leaders, they focus more on the importance of exchanging ideas with individuals and also within the organization. Another different type of leader that's different from servant leadership is transformational leaders. Transformational leaders focus on large-scale organizations and their behaviors within the individual organizations. So transformational leaders and those traditional leaders that are transactional leaders are very different from servant leaders, because servant leaders give of themselves. They give their all.
If you took a look at the first slide, there was a tiny URL that you can follow and have these slides anytime. And I'm not going to play it now, but that link is a video by Otto Scharmer. He's a researcher and professor at MIT. And in that video, it's about 5 minutes, and I won't take the time now, but he talks about the need for change, the way things have traditionally been done. And as women who are coming up into leadership, let's embrace that different type of interaction. And we have a global community, and methods for working together need to be fostered. There's a great quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower that I want to share. It's hitting people over the head is not leading, it's assault. So I love that. And as I said, it's very timely. I just read 2 articles about it, and it's been advocated and practiced by 3 out of Forbes' top 100 businesses. So it aspires to openness, fairness, and camaraderie. I'll give you just a brief background, and then we'll talk more about our research. That's why we're here. It started with this book by Hermann Hesse, and it's about a man named H.H., of course, Hermann Hesse, who went on a mythical journey, and there was a servant named Leo, and he was really the person who kept everyone together. And when he left the group, when he left their journey, the whole group fell apart. Many years later, he's lost, he has no direction, and he tries to find the league again, and he finds that Leo was actually the leader. He was the servant, but he was the leader. So Robert Greenleaf, who worked for AT&T in the 1970s, read this book and was so inspired that he developed his own theory of leadership called servant leadership, and 2 essays that he wrote. One is The Servant as Leader, and you can get these on the Robert Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, and I have that link here also for you, and The Institution as Servant. And once I read those, I also got this book that came out just about 10 years ago, and it has all of the essays, and it says A Journey into the Nature of Legitimate Power and Greatness. So Juanita's going to tell you a little bit more about what are the attributes. You want me to do that? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the attributes, these are, Robert Greenleaf wrote about these in his essays, and then other researchers have pared down all of his descriptions of servant leadership into these attributes, and we're going to be talking about it when we talk about our research that we did.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Sorry. There's some kind of talking or something on one of your computers on it. Do you have something running?
I don't have
Not
anything
us.
running.
Does everybody hear that?
Yes.
Another session.
Another session.
This new building has sound like that.
Right, I hear it too.
Yes.
It's not, we don't have anything turned on, that's all right. I don't
That's
have
okay.
anything, it's nothing that we have turned on.
Okay.
I apologize.
Thank you.
We'll do our best to talk over it. So altruistic calling, that's where my title came from, leading without self-glory. So when we talk about your motivations, we've all worked for people who we think they have motives that aren't really jiving with what we want in an organization or what they're saying one thing and having other motives. But this is motives and initiative. You want to lead, you want to be a servant first, and it talks about self-sacrifice, not self-denial, but self-sacrifice of self-glory. You're not there so that everyone says, oh, look at what a great job they're doing. You really want to make a difference. The next one is called emotional healing, and it's communicating based on listening, understanding, acceptance of others, even their faults, knowing that if led wisely, even lazy people can become heroes if they have a good leader. And I think of it as meeting the person where they are and then leading them to their best potential. That's emotional healing. Wisdom, which is decision-making based on conceptual insight and awareness and perception of others. A book that really talks about having this type of leadership skill is a professor of ours wrote this book, Futures-Based Change Management, so I have that on my resources also. Persuasive mapping is synergy, people working together. The leader has a vision, and then they're able to communicate it to the shareholders and bring everyone in to a common purpose. And then organizational stewardship, in which the leader brings the organization to a virtuous orientation, trying to make the world a better place, the community a better place. And when I talked about social justice, one of the questions that Robert Greenleaf had leaders ask, are the least advantaged people in the community better off than they were before? So that's an important part of servant leadership.
So now we have what is called a traditional organizational structure. This traditional organizational structure is a top-down structure. It's a hierarchy. And most of businesses today and in the educational field, there is a traditional organization hierarchy where you have the top, who's the CEO, and then you have all the other stakeholders that come into play. This is a formal structure that may inhibit innovation and creativity from the workers that you are over, this hierarchy. It also stunts the growth and creativity of the leader. So when there is no feedback from those workers that you are working with, it stunts the growth. It also weakens communication. When you have a hierarchy, a top-down, it's going to weaken the communication with that leader. It also dries up channels of honest feedback. If you are a leader, you would want honest feedback so that you can make that organization a lot better. A servant leader stresses team building.
Right, they call it prima inter pares, which is first among equals,
Right.
team building. All right, so let's talk about our research. If you want to read our research, there's a link there right on to where it's published. A little background, Juanita and I are finishing our doctoral studies, and we had a research course, and we had to do research on a topic that interests us. And our research is based on a dissertation by Dr. Brian Zahn of Southampton High School. He's the principal there. So he, for his dissertation, had an interview of not an interview, survey among 162 teachers, and he wanted to find out the teachers' perception of their principal's servant leadership characteristics, and then he wanted to see how that interacted with student achievements. And interestingly, his findings were that the schools with the lowest academic achievement actually had more team learning than the higher achieving schools. And that seems counterintuitive, and if you are interested in reading his dissertation, I do have the link to that also. So that was interesting, and that's in the educational field. But Juanita will talk about our research. So he had collected a lot of data, and he didn't use all of it. And we were given permission with him as a mentor to do our own research based on gender and servant leadership. So now Juanita will explain our research.
So our agenda focused on the purpose of our study was about analyzing the interactions between teacher gender and principal gender on teacher perceptions of altruistic calling and team learning. Teachers and principals, we found that teachers and principals' gender had no significant effect on the characteristics of altruistic calling. We also found that both male and female teachers.
We're hearing
Yes.
some kind of feedback from another. Coming through over here. Right.
Should we just yell, "Shut up," really loudly?
Can you hear that? Do you hear that?
I do. Let me just check if that's coming from the speakers or if it's coming from the vents from the other room. 'Cause
Oh,
okay.
It's a known issue.
Okay.
So when you guys talk through the microphone, it works fine, right?
We believe so.
We believe so.
Okay. So
You know, interesting, I only hear one of the speakers through our speakers, though.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Like when you speak,
Yes.
I hear you over the speakers, when you speak, I don't.
Right.
Okay.
And he had said that he wasn't sure if my mic was working.
Right.
so right now you guys can still hear them, right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is an issue with ventilation, not with the media station. So that's not something we can do.
Is there anything you can do to make my mic work? Can you hear me? Am I loud enough for people to hear?
Okay.
Oh, that needs to be a lot closer, like on your collar. That's
Oh.
that's the problem. Like on the bow, you could put it like right here. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? No.
Can I
A
see
little
the
better.
the transmitter? That's on. It's got power. And this is B.
Right.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. And this one.
No, he said only two
okay.
could be on at the same
Oh,
time.
this one's B. Yeah. So you guys aren't using this.
No, this is the, and I can hear
Yeah,
myself.
that's A. That's
Yes.
B. And this
Okay.
is the other B, the handheld. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So do you want to,
I didn't finish.
all right, so we'll go back to our research.
We'll go back.
So we did this research on, and Juanita will explain.
Yes, the purpose of our research was to analyze the interaction between teacher gender and principal gender and teacher perceptions on altruistic calling and team learning. And what we found was that teacher and principal's gender had no significant effect on the characteristics of altruistic calling. Both male and female teachers rated female leaders higher in altruistic calling. And teachers that were male and female rated their female principals with team learning. These were some of the characteristics,
Okay, so
which leads us into team learning.
what is team learning?
What is team learning?
Okay, so team learning is, has been identified by Peter Senge as one of the core disciplines in this book, The Fifth Discipline for Learning Organizations. Team learning is essential for people to make decisions in teams where egos are set aside. Okay? Servant leadership, with its focus on growth and nurturing people, can be an ethical approach to decision making and inspiring others to do the right thing. And you can see that team learning, although it's in the fifth discipline, is a natural outgrowth of servant leadership, especially in the team building and a different type of hierarchy where it's first among equals. So collaboration, empathy, vision, listening, and group focus. These are all the things that make up team learning.
So team learning is a collaborative effort to achieve a common goal. It also is aimed at learning to attain an objective through dialogue, through discussion, also through conflicts, and also through routines and practice within that group. This is what team learning is all about.
So I mentioned briefly about the fifth discipline and learning organizations. People working at their best. I have a video of Peter Senge as one of the resources. And he says it's people working at their best. Let's get rid of the jargon. Generative learning, learning that enhances our creativity. So if you need decisions made or some kind of problem solving, if you're engaged in team learning, people will be more apt to be creative. They won't be afraid to bring forth ideas. real commitment to learning, to create innovative solutions and examining goals. And team members should be prepared to be wrong. That's an important part of learning organizations. Team learning means that the intelligence of the group exceeds the intelligence of the members. Working, listening, reacting to each other respectfully. That's what the listening and empathy is based on. Okay. So what does this mean for women transforming themselves into servant leaders for the 21st century? I like this quote that I have here. Servant leaders are called into action because they know the only way to change the world is to produce enough people who will change it. So you are going to lead by example. Your behavior is what can launch the culture of your organization into one that has an orientation based on caring, based on making the world a better place. So how do you do that? By what you pay attention to and reward, by whom you promote, how you handle critical incidents. People are watching you. You're the role model. Be the role model. So the behaviors that you have to focus on are empathy and listening, building high trust relationships. People can trust you as a leader. You talk the talk and you walk the walk. That's very important. Empower others by encouraging ideas and personal growth. If you can see the strength in other people and what are their strengths and encourage that development in them, that also brings high trust. You may see something in people that they don't see in themselves. You wouldn't take someone who's strong in data analysis and make them customer relations if that's not what their strength is. So I think that's what that means. I'm losing my microphone again. I got it. And one of the key things is professional development. Well-constructed professional learning requires participants to think outside the box, to be able to embrace new ideas and new ways of thinking. And Juanita will talk about something you have to keep in mind as you're dealing with adults. And adult learning is different than students that we deal with as we're teachers.
So adult learning is definitely different than student learning, and that's where we have transformative learning theory. The transformative learning theory was brought about in 2000, approximately in 1970, by this author, a researcher named Mesereau. And transformative learning theory is the process of using your prior interpretations to construe a new or revised interpretation of a meaning of one's experience in order to guide future action. So what does that really mean? That really means that your knowledge and what you're processing, you're interpreting what you already know. That's your prior knowledge. And the more you process, the more knowledge you process, you construe or you transform to new knowledge. That's what you're doing, and new meaning. And it's guiding you for future practice or future actions in what you do. So the things that we need to be conscious of when we have adult learners, and we want to keep in mind when we're preparing professional development and creating professional development to seek change, we would like to use some assumptions about adult learners. Those assumptions would be that adult learners have learning experiences, and so as they mature, they accumulate growing reservoirs of experience that becomes increased with the resources that they take in. These learning experiences create motivation to learn. So adult learners, just like student learners, they have a motivation to learn, but the key is that as they mature, the motivation for them to learn is very internal. That those internal priorities are more important than the external priorities that maybe students may not have. And this increases their job satisfaction, their self-esteem, their quality of life. It also increases the importance of the different types of activities that they take into their lives. Hence, if you are an educator, you build your students with self-esteem and a sense of accomplishment. If you are an administrator or a leader in the business world, then you use these strategies to build up your stakeholders with self-esteem, their sense of accomplishment. You also, as an adult learner, adult learners have experiences that are much more mature, that articulates, that maturity articulates with whatever they do throughout their life and in their life practice. And all this leads into servant leadership or a servant leader, because as a servant leader, you're incorporating all of these things into yourself, and you're bringing it to your students. If you're an educator, you're bringing it to your staff, your stakeholders, all of those who encompass who you have under you. It is a collaborative, it is a collective. All the decisions that are made, even though you may be the head of a company or the head administrator, it is a collaborative, and those decisions that you make is with the group. It is a group effort. Christine.
I hope that you take this tiny URL and look at some of these, before we do questions, some of these resources. So our paper is the first link if you want to read it. We have it here also if you want to take a look at it. This link is, I don't know if I should click on them and open them up.
Yeah,
The Robert Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. Even though he passed away, I think about 15 years ago, this is a very active site and has a lot of resources, a lot of things to read, but also videos, and I'll show you that down here. The Greenleaf Center videos and podcasts for learning how to facilitate team learning, how to become a servant leader, the great resources. This is an article, I have it actually printed out here, What Does Servant Leadership in Action Look Like? It was just written 2 weeks ago. This fourth one is about gender and servant leadership. Again, not our paper, but it was very interesting. It talks about it being, servant leadership being a holistic type of leadership, because there's feminine attributes, which are the communal attributes: empathy, healing, altruism, commitment to growth, and it also has agentic or more traditionally considered masculine traits like foresight, awareness, conceptualization, and persuasion. So it's considered gender integrative. And that's just, it's a paper to read about. And these are our works cited. So do we have...
So, it's opened up to questions. Yes.
In your research, have you come across any shining example of a person or an organization that exhibited servant leadership?
Okay, they wanted us to repeat the question.
Yes.
So in our research, have we seen anyone who's a shining example? There was actually something written last week in the Smart Brief on leadership, and there was a man that was highlighted with his servant leadership. He took a small family business in the Midwest, and he's really started a lot of programs for youth in the community, giving back, and a lot of programs for his community. In this article, they talk about Southwest Airlines and what they're doing for the community. And they've gotten a lot of awards for their work in servant leadership. So yes, there are a lot, and they actually have them on that site, the Greenleaf Center. They'll highlight different business people, and I really like this one also. They talked about a coach that was considered a servant leader, a college coach. So there are a lot of examples.
And there are many organizations that we see here in the world today that they may not have the name behind them as a servant leader, but they are servant leaders because they are serving the community. They are giving of themselves, not necessarily lacking, as Christine said, themselves, but they're giving of themselves, and they're helping other organizations and other communities. It's a collaborative, it's a collective.
And the name of the coach I just wanted to give to you is Pat Summit. So we're talking about how she was a servant leader. Yes.
Yes.
Hi, so my question is about, I find this concept of servant leadership very interesting, and I'll admit, this is the first actually that I've heard of it. Something that we struggle with in our community when we're trying to train, say, graduate students, and I work with postdocs to become leaders, is that sometimes everyone is kind of told to be a leader, and our traditional notion of a leader is, I guess, a transactional leader.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mhm.
lead from the top,
Mhm.
top leaders. Every time I go to a leadership talk, I end up asking these kinds of questions about, well, what if you don't want that sort of monolithic leadership type experience? Should everyone be the CEO, the leader? What if you're not that person? And then I find people start to shut down about this kind of leadership training, and they don't really know how they might fit into that more traditional model. It sounds like servant leadership is that model.
It is exactly. It is exactly.
Which perhaps we should be teaching more. So I guess it's a comment and question. I hate when people do
Right.
that. So here's my question. One, how can we teach this more? But more importantly, how can we recognize this more as a valid and credible and worthy type of leadership? When you look at the way our performance evaluations are done and things like that, everyone's about the assessment and the numbers and the what did you do for me today? And if your accomplishments are more sort of bringing up your group, they're harder to quantify in some sense. So how can we teach it, and how can we create more methods, I guess, to identify value of that type of
That's an excellent question, and Juanita and I had never heard of it either, but in our doctoral program, we had great professors who
Yes.
shared with us these type of resources. So some people that I haven't put into our resources, Edgar Schein,
Yes.
who talks about culture change, changing the culture of the organization. They have to see the validity by exposure.
Exactly.
And he actually he has a lot of ways of bringing the group together and identifying what are their assumptions, what are their values of the organization. So if you're working with postdocs and you bring these resources to them and let them know about it, maybe when they become leaders, they'll embrace that. I would never embrace something I
Right.
wouldn't look at it for myself.
Also, too, servant leadership is a big part of, as we talked about, team learning. So it's about pulling together a team. It's about thinking as one. It's not one thinking for themselves. It's about bringing together a team. They're all acting as one. They're acting as a group. It's about that collaboration. It's about having empathy for others who are making a statement or making a comment on what it is that they're talking about. It's about having that same vision, that same mission, the same passion for whatever it is they're doing. It's also about communicating and listening to each other. It's about, these are the things that we can build on when we're teaching, especially our students, doing those work projects and looking at that same goal or looking at the same mission. You all want to accomplish the same thing. It's about the group. It's about that group focus. What do you want to focus on? And that's what we teach. Servant leadership is about all of that team learning.
Yes.
Then you
Yes.
don't get the deliverable to write down on your CV necessarily. I guess that's
Right.
that's
Well, not necessarily. I guess if you're doing all of these projects for your community, those are things that can be recognized.
Exactly. And it's a team effort. It's not an I. Servant leadership isn't about the I. It's about the we. It's about the us. Yes.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
The whole concept of this is leading without self-glory.
Yes.
So if you're just, what I was going to say, the quantifiable is more about the team effort. So when I believe what they're trying to say is when you're writing down on the CV, it should be, what I would assume is project, X, Y, and Z, describe the project, served as leader of project X. These were the quantifiable results of the project, acted as team leader, can refer to so-and-so to verify this. But the whole concept of this is to have results of this, but it's not really supposed to be about the self-glory. It's supposed to be about how you can create a result for your community to better the community. It's not
Right.
really supposed to be about I'm the leader. It's about me. It's about how I do better for myself. It's supposed to be how you can better your community.
And it's not. We only pass this way once, so let's do something meaningful. Let's make a difference. And something I don't think I mentioned. This whole leadership theory is not based on religion, and it's not even based on culture or anything like that. It's supposed to be an internal feeling that like I said, we only pass this way once, and let's do something meaningful. It's not about I'm the greatest leader and beating people over the head.
Yes.
Two comments. I think what she was saying, Katie, was more about how do we incorporate
Right.
this concept in how we review people and their work and their performance, their accomplishments. So that
Right,
then
right, and if you are a leader, you can, it really takes a lot,
do that.
right, it takes a lot to change the culture of an organization and the way you review people. And like I said, it's what you pay attention. If you're a leader and you're hiring, or how you handle incidents, or what you pay attention to, what you reward. If you are in academia, and you're preparing new leaders, it's what you expose them to. You know, there are resources here in books that are really, you know, this is what should be taught to us as leaders,
Yes.
educational leaders. But really, these are, Peter Senge wrote for businesses, and we were in an educational leadership program, and we were reading The Fifth Discipline, which is about businesses, and we were using it to be educational, learn how to be educational leaders. So if you're preparing leaders, that's what you should expose them to.
Well, my second comment is exactly related to what you just said. I'm currently reading a book, and I wondered if anybody else is reading it. I think it's really good. He goes by saying, well, I'm a Long Island kid, and he made out very well. He owns Bridgewater, and the title of the book that I'm reading really, I think, embraces some of this, but I'm only at the beginning of it.
Right.
It's called Principles. It was copyright 2017, and it's about principles of his life and work. And he talks about how he grew his company and how he created a culture in which people can
Right.
talk with each other, empower everybody to make good decisions, not to be afraid to bring things up. And he talks about how to create the culture and how to hire the right people. And he's been, because of that, and so he's written about his leadership skills and how he built the company and why it's so successful. So I would say, if you haven't read it, and it might be added to your
And you know what? I would take my.
It's called Principles. And it's Ray, D-A-L-I-O, is the author.
Thank you.
And if there's
it's a great read. And I'm only like barely beginning it, but it's really wonderful. And it's got great reviews.
And if anybody else has anything to suggest, we
Right.
have cards, you could email us. But one I want to show you, I mean, I can't click onto it, I would take up here. The one that says Presencing Institute, that's the Otto Scharmer that I spoke about briefly in the beginning, and he runs this Presencing Institute. He has a theory called Theory U, and it's a way of conducting meetings that changes the whole dialogue. Instead of, he calls it the blind spot, operating in the blind spot, where you keep repeating old problems and old complaints. It's getting beyond that and a way to respond to the future as it emerges, he calls it. And he has great videos. They're all pretty long, and that's why I wouldn't play one for you. But if this is something you're interested in, and it's something that you want to embrace as a leader, we have so many resources that we couldn't even put on here,
Right.
and we would love to share them with you. We found it fascinating, and we really have to thank our professors that, even though we're in educational leadership, they took us beyond. And showed us things that we wouldn't have ever been exposed to in the educational field. They're all business, so I'm assuming most of you are in the business world, right? So these are all resources maybe when you went to school you didn't get exposed to, but they're still out there and they're valid, and they're, to me, I think it's a better way of leading people.
And what school? Sorry, what?
We went to St. John's.
Oh, St. John's.
St. John's University.
The program for
Yes.
I imagine I must have misheard something before, because I'm hearing all the ways that team building, that's something that we want to do, but the research study that you built your dissertation
Yes.
off of, did I misunderstand that more team building actually equals less academic success?
Well, he did a survey.
That was with him.
That was with
Yes,
him.
that was with
And,
Dr. Zahn.
Dr. Zahn, and
Yes.
his dissertation is here. And there were other reasons for it that sort of impeded the team learning, because it was a lack of accountability that he found within those schools also.
So is there research to show that team building actually does equal success?
In the business world, yes.
In the business world.
In the business
yes.
world, yes. And I really urge you to either read The Fifth Discipline, or there's so many videos by Peter Senge where he speaks about that, and he has a lot of data that it.
Also in the educational world.
Well, there's not a lot of research. That's what we were.
We just looked at the role of gender in servant leadership, but that encompassed, because we took it from Dr. Zahn, he was talking about education. His dissertation was on education and student academic achievement. So we didn't necessarily look at the student academic achievement. We looked at what the teacher perceptions were with role gender and how that affected those teachers within academia or the educational field.
They were in high school.
High school. They were in high school.
But again, the limit of the study was that he only sent the survey out to 162 teachers.
Right.
And it was 15 schools. So I always say the caveat is the limit of the study was a small study. You should study it again in the business field and see, but I think that there has been over the past 40 years a lot of studies that show that it does promote business.
Yes.
I've studied quality in the past, and we studied a lot of Eastern philosophy. I think most of your research is focused here domestically in the United
Yes.
States. If you look on a global scale, there is a ton more research. And actually, there's a Chinese philosopher who died in 533 BC called Lao Tzu.
Lao
Yes.
Tzu.
And his
Yeah.
one of his most famous quotes is, "When the best leader's work is done, the people say they did it ourselves." So you're talking 533 BC, this guy is saying that.
And
So
actually,
I think if we look
yeah.
globally Eastern, there's a whole lot more research.
He Greenleaf writes that, and also they were going to the east. The journey was to the
Right.
east, and he right. So it's all a lot of it's based on, you know, it's not just Judeo-Christian, it's on Eastern philosophy too. So that's why I say it transcends culture and it transcends religion, this whole concept. So, and you know, in common sense, if you treat your customers and your employees ethically, business is going to be better, right? I mean, just makes sense. And the shareholders and the employees are going to go that extra mile because they know they're respected. I'm sure you've been in meetings where you have a great idea, but nobody wants to listen to it because the big shots have to talk and they have to say blah blah blah. Have this. We know we're in education, and sometimes they come up with these new plans and they throw out the old plans, and we don't have a say. And we're the ones in the trenches. So if you could get that kind of team building.
It's cultural, I think.
It definitely is
As
cultural.
Americans, we're more haughty or prideful, for
Mhm,
lack of a better term. We, in general.
And also,
And
too,
in those cultures, it's more of a servant
Yes.
mentality from the get-go.
Well, I'm hoping that the people in this room can make a change, even if it's a small change.
Right.
If this was food for thought and the first time you've ever heard about it, we found it very fascinating when we researched it,
interesting.
and that's why we came to present to you today.
And that's why we talked about professional development. We know in the business world, there's a lot of professional development with their members. However, in the educational world, professional development is stagnant. It's not consistent. And that's why we brought it out in how adults learn.
I would just, if you want to get I'm going to go back. If you didn't get the tiny URL that could give you the link to this, you can take a picture with your phone, and then you can get this link, and then all of the resources, all you have to do is click the hyperlink, and then you can. That's why I put it up there. So take a picture of it, or we have cards. You could email us, and I could email you the presentation or any other resources that I didn't mention, and maybe you can send me
Right,
information I didn't
information.
know about.
So we thank you for coming. We hope that this was an interesting topic. It was interesting for us. Thank you very much. Thank you.